Okay, hi everyone. My name is Kevin Ho. Welcome to our Fusang webinar. So I am COO of Fusang Exchange. Today we are very glad to have a very honorable guest to join me for this session. Today we're going to talk about our first security token listing on Fusang Exchange, which is SPiCE Venture Capital. So with me I have Tal Elyashiv, co-founder and managing partner of SPiCE VZ. So the structure of today's webinar is going to be 3 sessions. So we start off with giving you guys the introduction of what SPiCE VZ is and what they do. And I also want to share with you guys in the second session about the SPiCE VZ STO journey. I believe a lot of our audience are quite interested in knowing what is tokenization and why people would do tokenization. And lastly, of course, we will give you a session on Q&A. If you have any questions, just feel free to send in your questions through Zoom. I believe Tal is more than happy to answer your questions. Maybe without further ado, I would just pass on to Tal to let him introduce himself and give you a quick overview of SPiCE VZ. Here you are, Tal.
Thank you, Kevin. As Kevin said, I'm Tal Elyashiv. I'm founder and managing partner of SPiCE. I'm also one of the founders of Securities, one of the leading platforms in the industry, which we'll talk about in a bit. Let's jump into SPiCE itself. All right. So SPiCE is a venture capital fund. It invests in companies, technology companies that are building the ecosystem of the tokenization industry, basically companies that are building platforms and ecosystem services that business verticals like capital markets, securities, banking, real estate, insurance, and so on, use in order to further their business and move them into distributed ledger and tokenization. We invest globally around the world. Our current portfolio is spread between the US, Israel, UK, Switzerland, and Singapore. But we're not limited to these countries only. And we look for companies that are building components of the ecosystem that we believe will grow significantly as this industry keeps on growing, and it's growing very rapidly. We are considered to be the leader in the blockchain and digital securities industry, very much the founders of digital securities or security tokens. And the result of that is that we have great access to the best deals in the market in terms of investments. And we also understand the ecosystem, not just the current ecosystem, but where it needs to go very well, because we were there from the beginning and have a very strong vision of where it's going. And we believe that this gives us a good ability to choose best investments within what's out there in the market. This is just one out of many mapping of different verticals that are using blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is there to impact almost any transactional industry you can think of, and will have profound impact on those industries. But the industries to the left that are more financial in nature seem to be the industries that adopted these technologies and moved much faster than others. So for now, a lot of our focus is in that side of the map in terms of investing. We invest in companies that we want to see them appreciate within the lifetime of the fund, so our investors can benefit from this growth. Just to give you a sense of why it's enough for a fund to focus on something that seems like maybe it's narrow. Let's talk about just one part of it, capital markets, and even a specific part within capital markets, the digital securities industry, just to give you a sense of the size and the potential growth within this industry. Around the world, there are more than $250 billion worth of assets that are ready and are being digitized in a process that will happen over the next 10 to 15 years. Within 10 to 15 years, all the securities industry around the world, private and public, and all different assets, is going to be digitized. It's just the way it's going to be. Size potential, quadrillion is $1,000 trillion. And if we compare it to the crypto market today is around 300 billion in size. So about 10,000 times smaller than just the digital securities industry size potential. And this is why these are industries that are very interesting for us to invest in ecosystem companies that help those industries digitize and grow to that size, because they will grow with that. And some of our portfolio companies have already, and we'll mention that. But this is why it's very interesting for us, and this is why it's interesting for us to focus on companies that deal with digitization of verticals that we see are moving into this technology fast and deep.
Right. I think, Fusang Exchange share the same vision like SPiCE VC. We believe this market has a huge potential to grow. To me, honestly speaking, it's very much like 20 years ago when we see internet, for the first time. I believe, this tokenization and securitization, digital securities is, the way to rationalize capital market going forward. I believe a lot of, crypto savvy audience have heard of, the SPiCE VC name in a lot of media channels in the past 2-3 years, but probably they are not quite aware of what exactly, SPiCE VC invests into and why they are so good at. So maybe, Tal, you can share with us, your portfolio investment and give us a sense of what they are.
Sure. So I'll just mention that, as I said before, we did our first closing in mid-2018 and started investing then. We invested in 15 companies. You can see them here on the slide. We're now doing the second closing of the fund, and we'll continue investing in more companies. I'll mention just some companies out of the portfolio to give you a sense, but in essence, SPiCE is a traditional VC fund in the sense that it invests in technology startups. The uniqueness is that we focus on specific industries and specific domains. We're not broad. We're really focused on providing exposure to our investors for the growth of the tokenization industry. Some examples: Securitize is the major platform for issuing security tokens, digital securities, and managing compliance of those tokens throughout their lifetime in all relevant jurisdictions. Just to give you a sense, Securitize is the platform on which most of the digital securities to date have been issued. And it's considered already a unicorn within this industry. Bakkt is another one. One of its major founders and backers is the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. It has many large institutional and banks behind it. Today, it's already a huge company. It's a financial company that is built on blockchain and is there to provide blockchain-based financial services and crypto services to customers. INX is a digital securities and digital assets exchange, pretty much like Fusang, but in the US. It's regulated by the SEC. The interesting thing about INX is that it's now going through its IPO, its public offering. It's the first IPO regulated by the SEC that is based on a security token. This is a major, major shift in the world. It's like an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange or on the on NASDAQ, but it's based on digital security, and it's a first in a history. They're raising $130 million, and again, for a startup that that we back, that means a very, very significant growth in the portfolio. And maybe the last one I would mention, and then we'll move on, is Ripio. Ripio is a blockchain-based financial provider in South America. They are the largest platform for blockchain-based services and crypto in places like Brazil and Mexico. These are economies where the move to cryptocurrencies and to blockchain-based lending and other services is very, very significant because of the lack of trust in governments and in banks in those areas. And Ripio has been growing like crazy. They've passed 500,000 customers last month, and they keep growing. They expect to get to 1 million customers by the end of the year. We're talking retail customers. That's huge. So these are some of the portfolio companies that are already considered kind of unicorns and blue chip names in the industry. We, of course, invested when they were earlier on in their cycle.
Whoa, fantastic. I think, our audience, a lot of them are, quite familiar with the STO and cryptos, and the name securitize pop up also a lot of time in different channels. So congratulations, you guys have a portfolio of, great companies in our space. So with this portfolio, I believe your performance is not bad, right? Can you show us, how good you are compared to other as a class?
Sure. It's important to say we are looking at performance for the first 2 years of the fund. If we compare it to regular indices, of course, it looks great. Our portfolio has appreciated by 65% since the early investors came in. It's important to say that the real comparison is other venture capital funds, and the performance graph for venture capital funds for the first few years is actually downwards, because the first few years there's no appreciation, there's mostly expenses. So investors in VC funds usually see a depreciation of value in the first few years, and only then they start seeing an increase in value. We've shown already 65% in the first 2 years. It's phenomenal for VC funds, and we'll mention later, but the liquidity factor versus other VC funds adds another significant value beyond this appreciation.
Good, good. Well, 65% in 2 years' time is really fantastic, I can tell you. Given I've been in capital market for the last 2 decades, this kind of performance is not easy to get, I tell you. By the way, I believe, a lot of our audience are very interested in knowing who's the people behind this company or the fund, right? Basically the brain of this, a success. Can you tell us a little bit more on that?
Sure. So we are a truly global and distributed team. The 3 partners in the fund, and you can read on our website more information about us, but we are located in Switzerland, in the US, and in Israel. And actually we have presence in Singapore as well. The three partners have somewhat similar background in the sense that the three of us were senior executives in major corporations. I, for example, was a CIO at Capital One and a CIO at Bank of America, and a bunch of other very large transactional or financial businesses. But the three of us are also serial entrepreneurs. We started, grew, and sold multiple companies. We're also investors for well over a decade. Between the three of us, we started and managed over 10 funds with an average size of several $billion each of the funds. So we're no strangers to the fund management business as well. But I think the interesting thing about the team is, first, we're truly global. I spent my career between the US, Israel, Europe, and Asia. Carlos is Spanish, and he spent his career between Spain, Japan, the US, and Dubai. And Rene, who's Swiss, spent his career between the US and Switzerland. So we're truly a global team. And we've been on all sides of the venture capital game. We were investors, we were entrepreneurs, and we were corporate executives that were there to use or buy those startups or their products. So we understand this game really well, and I think we play it a little bit different than many traditional VCs that came only through the VC channel.
Good, right. Very fantastic. I think, you know, our audience have a brief understanding about SPiCE VC, what you guys are doing, not just looking at the name in the newspaper or the media, right? It's a very good summary of what you guys are doing. By the way, I believe like myself, right, and a lot of audience here, they would love to learn why you guys, you know, pick STO, because you guys, honestly speaking, are one of the first few STOs in this space. So what really, you know, turned you on for doing this tokenization? And tell us a bit about, you know, how is your STO journey?
All right. So in essence, we started, as I said, SPiCE in 2017, early 2017, and one of the things that that we were looking at is the major issue for investors in VC funds is twofold. One, VC funds are a complicated asset to invest in, and so and a lot of the work of VC funds is very manual, working versus their investors and so on. So VC funds traditionally limit their LPs, their investors, to 10 to 20 LPs in a fund. And the meaning of that is that every investor then has to invest at least $5 to $10 million in order to get in the game. The other thing is that VC funds traditionally are very illiquid asset. So if an investor manages to sell their holding in a fund, it's typically a transaction that takes 6 to 9 months, and they usually lose 35 to 40% in the transaction. And we wanted to solve these two problems, and we were looking at the crypto market and the ICO market that was going around us, and it was clear to us that it's not suitable for what we were doing, because this is a real security, right? It's not crypto, and it's not an ICO, but the technology itself could be adopted and adapted to change and do the same thing that we wanted to do for securities. And so we walked around and talked to the major issuers of tokens for ICOs at the time and said, look, what we want is slightly different. It's the same technology, but we want to put in it all the regulatory compliance rules that are required for securities management, and some of the financial business rules that are required for securities management and so on. And we want to put it into the smart contracts, into the tokenization, and into the platform. Would you do it for us? And we said, you know, you can have the IP if you want. And all of them basically said, it's too complicated, it cannot be done, go away. And after we heard it 3 or 4 times, we said, we'll do it ourselves. And we did. We started building the technology for doing it ourselves because it seemed like a worthwhile problem to solve. Long story short, this became securitized because at a certain point, we realized it's too important and at the beginning of a new industry to bury it under SPiCE. So we spun it off as an independent company and it became the unicorn that it is today. And this is where a lot of our understanding in the ecosystem comes from. But the bottom line is really, we did it for 2 reasons. We wanted to create more liquidity. So investors in a VC fund will be able to see returns from their investors from investment much earlier than 7 to 10 years into their investment. And the second thing is once everything is automated, all the compliance is automated through the technology because it's digital, then we can afford to have many more investors. So SPiCE today has close to 400 investors already. And as we do our second closing now, and as more people start trading SPiCE on Fusang, then we'll see an increase in that size. And the meaning of that is that many more people that could not have access to VC investment before now have the access, and they're not stuck with illiquidity for 7 to 10 years. They can have liquidity much more available to them. So some of our investors, for them, it's okay to wait and to see all the returns. For others, they may hold it for a certain period of time, see some of the appreciation, and then decide to liquidate it and move to something else, and that option is open for them as well. So that was the main motivation. Obviously, doing it in 2018 was very difficult because the regulatory frameworks were not there, and regulations in certain places were not clear yet. So it was very hard to aim for regulation where it's not clear where the regulation is going. And a lot of the things were manual. Today, everything is automatic and digitized and programmed. So it's much, much simpler. And a lot of regulations have developed. And you see it in Asia, right? Significant regulation developments in Singapore and Hong Kong and Malaysia and a bunch of other places that make it much more clear what are digital securities and how to deal with them in a regulated way. So it makes life much easier.
Right. Right. Thank you very much for sharing the reason behind, you do your tokenization exercise, right? Given that you're one of the really first few compliance securities tokens in the market, how do you see this market would develop going forward, like say 3 years down the road? How do you see the potential in this market?
Yeah, so I'll say it at a title and then talk a little bit more about it. So really, I believe that all securities, private and public, in 10 to 15 years are going to be done in the digital way. It's almost like when we started digitizing music, it seemed like it's not a big change because we moved from vinyl to CDs and it wasn't a big deal. Only until we started streaming music and video, it became clear that it's shifting the whole industry totally. And this is what is going to happen with digital securities. I think and STOs are part of that, right? I think that in 10 to 15 years, all IPOs and all private offerings will be done in a digital way as digital securities. And all capital markets will be digitized the same way. Now, it's not just kind of a vision that is yet to be seen in reality. Over the last year, if you look at it just from 2019, major institutions have joined the game of digital securities. You can look at the slide. These are the biggest names in, and I'm just looking at capital markets, a little bit in banking, payments, and insurance, but mostly capital markets. You'll see major issuers on the left-hand side that already issued digital securities or are in the process of issuing digital securities. You see major institutions and banks investing in this, from MUFG, one of the largest banks in the world, Sony, Goldman Sachs, Nomura Securities, the major capital markets player, SPiCE, London Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, SPiCE, the Swiss Stock Exchange, and so on. And a lot of institutions that are developing their own capabilities in this domain, not just technology, but also business capabilities. You can see names like JP Morgan, Facebook, MasterCard, UBS, Barclays, CIBC, HSBC, major institutions and banks that are moving into the industry, which are already supporting that vision that I'm repeating for the last 3 years. But the meaning of that is that eventually everything will be done this way in this industry or those industries. What the next 10, 15 years will look like is not obvious because things will continue evolving and shifting. There's still a bunch of components that are evolving and missing in the ecosystem. And this is great for us as a VC because it gives us a lot of opportunities to invest in companies that are closing those gaps. And if we choose right and continue choosing right, then our investors will benefit a lot from that.
Good. Yeah, I do share the same view. You know, this is the way to go forward. Institutions are actually getting into this space. Maybe one last question before I jump to Q&A. Why Asia? Why Fusang?
Okay, very good question. So first, let's not forget, SPiCE is a Singaporean entity. We're a Singaporean fund. So we're Asian to begin with. The second thing is, in the first closing already, about a third of our investors are Asian. Mostly in that round from Hong Kong and Singapore, but also from other Asian countries. We've been tracking regulations and approach to digital securities in Asia over the last couple of years. And, you know, I've been to Asia many times over the last couple of years. And I've seen the approach change in China, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Japan, and other places. And we feel that today, Asia and certain countries in Asia came to a point where there is not just interest, but more practical interest and appetite for investing in digital securities. And we also think that the ecosystem in Asia is going to start developing now as it was developing in the US and Europe. And we see it, if you saw on the slide before, a lot of the names were Asian too. because a lot of the development of the ecosystem is there. So if the ecosystem is developing there and there is much more appetite for investing in this industry and getting exposed to this industry, it felt right for us to move to Asia. Why Fusang? For two reasons. One, it's the first fully regulated exchange that can do digital securities in Asia, and that's a big one. It's been important for us to do firsts, as you can see from our history, and being the first one to be traded on Fusang is really important for us because it helps us understand some of the intricacies and complexities in making such integrations, business and technology happen, and it helps us make investments in the ecosystem. The other reason and the main reason why Fusang, and don't blush, but we looked at multiple marketplaces and exchanges that are built to deal with digital securities. And from what we've seen, Fusang and the team seem to have got it right. The way you structure the exchange, the processes, and the user experience of trading on Fusang is much closer to how we believe this should look like and feel like for investors in digital securities. And we wanted to both participate and also help make that a success. So there we go. That's why Fusang.
Good. Thank you very much. Likewise, Fusang is very glad that we are the first one in Asia to welcome you here in Asia. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your experience in terms of tokenization. Indeed, we are overrun already, but we do receive a bunch of questions, on the channel. Maybe if we can spend another 5 minutes, if possible. Tal, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
We just,
And we can also provide answers later on for other questions that were in answers in writing if we want.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. So maybe for the sake of, our audience, in this webinars, we just, answer a couple of questions. And then, like you said, we, get back to them, by email or whatever means afterwards. Let me see this one. They are asking like, you have your funds, listed on exchange, right? But how do people keep track of your performance in terms of your fund and things like that? How do they do it?
So there are multiple ways to do it. One way, we as a fund, we advertise every quarter a net asset value report, and it's a report that goes over the portfolio and assesses the value of the portfolio. It uses very traditional accounting practices for assessing values of assets of that type. And we publish a net asset value per token number. That is the best approximation of the value we see per token. And the reason for that is, and it's important to understand, the token gives the token holder full economic rights to the performance of the portfolio. In other words, because the fund has a timeline, the fund is a 9-year fund. So at the end of 9 years, all assets will be liquidated. Some of the assets will do an exit along the way. We do not reinvest. Whenever an asset is liquidated, whether it's through an exit or because we liquidated it, we distribute all the proceeds to the token holders, right? So in essence, if you own 10% of the SPiCE tokens, you own 10% of the portfolio, and 10% of all the exits go to you, right? So the best approximation to the value of the token is the value of the whole portfolio divided by the number of tokens, right? And we publish this every quarter. And until now, the market seems to be using this as a good proxy for the value of the token. So the trades obviously are supply and demand, but usually they move around the last published net asset value per token. So that's one way to do it. The other way, SPiCE is traded on the blockchain, so you can track the price of SPiCE using anything like Etherscan or something like this, where you can scan blockchain and see trades and so on, or you can see it on the exchange. You can see the last trade and so on. So this is one thing, but there's a question you didn't ask, but I would add it here because I think some of the investors are asking. People are used to tokens from crypto where it's really complicated to store and they can be stolen or lost. This is not the case for SPiCE. SPiCE is a security, and securities are listed in your name. So if you're holding a SPiCE, it's listed in your name, it cannot be stolen, and you cannot lose it. If you lose it, we will just burn the old tokens and issue new tokens to you, right? So the issue there is not what will happen if they get stolen. They cannot get stolen because they're in your name. SPiCE can be stored either directly on wallet, or it can be stored on the exchange, like with Fusang. It can be stored with SPiCE. We can store it for you. Or there are third-party providers of custody like Coinbase that just notified last month that they're doing third-party custody for customers of SPiCE tokens. So all these are ways to hold the tokens if you don't want to deal with wallets yourself.
Right. Tal, your last point is actually one of the questions from the audience, asking how we can safekeep and store the tokens securely. I guess, we are already like 6 minutes overrun. As we said, right, we can actually answer the questions to each of our audience by emails afterwards. So if you don't mind, I think we should close this session by now. We do thank you very much, to all the audience participating in this webinar, and of course, Tal, for spending, like the last half an hour with us, sharing your thoughts about tokenization and your fund's performance and your fund's details. So I hope we can, Fusang Exchange arrange more, webinars like this, and probably arrange another chance of webinars with Tal or the team in some other format in the near future, so that to get to our friends or users on Fusang Exchange understand more about SPiCE VC and the team behind more in details. So yes, without further ado, I think this would be a very good session both for Fusang Exchange and SPiCE VC. All right, so thank you very much for your attendance. I hope we can have another good session with you guys in the very near future. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.